Have you ever wondered if the Bat God could actually survive a night in the SCP Foundation? We often say Batman with prep time is invincible, but today we're testing that theory against entities that violate the laws of physics. Here are the parameters for this experiment. Batman gets his standard patrol gear, exactly 24 hours of preparation time, and access to the Foundation's file summaries. He's fighting mathematical anomalies and biological impossibilities. We aren't just looking for a win, we're analyzing survival rates. Science and deduction work on puzzles, but let's see how they hold up against forces of nature. We'll start with the entity that started it all, where a single blink ends the experiment. The first subject is SCP-173. On the surface, this looks like a simple physical confrontation. It's a concrete statue. Batman breaks concrete for breakfast. But the threat profile here isn't durability, it's velocity relative to human biology. SCP-173 moves only when unobserved, but when it moves, it clocks speeds exceeding 20 meters per second. To put that in perspective, that is faster than a striking cobra and significantly faster than the human eye can track at close range. The scientific constraint here is the autonomic nervous system. The average human blink lasts between 100 and 400 milliseconds. In the time it takes Batman to blink once, SCP-173 can traverse nearly 8 meters. Even with Bruce Wayne's peak human conditioning, he cannot override the biological necessity of moisturizing his corneas indefinitely. Batman's strategy during his 24-hour prep would focus on artificial observation. He wouldn't rely on his own eyes. You can expect him to rig his cowl with motion sensors linked to a heads-up display or perhaps a rhythmic strobe light gadget that flashes at a high frequency, ensuring the room is never dark to a camera sensor for longer than a millisecond. A more low-tech solution he might employ is a mirrored cowl setup, allowing him to keep eyes on the target even while turning his head. However, the failure point lies in the nature of the anomaly itself. If Batman's tech glitches, or if the strobe desynchronizes by a fraction of a second, the creature bridges the gap instantly. Furthermore, the force output required to snap a neck at the base of the skull, SCP-173's primary method of execution, is immense. While Batman's suit is rated for ballistic impact and knife trauma, it is not designed to withstand the sudden hydraulic press level torque of a concrete structure twisting the cervical vertebrae. We rate this as a medium difficulty. Batman survives if he maintains distance and trusts his automated observation tech. But if he tries to engage in hand-to-hand combat or gets cornered in a space smaller than 10 meters, the statistical probability of survival drops to 0. You can't martial art your way out of a neck snap that happens faster than your neurons can fire a pain signal. Next, we have SCP-049, the Plague Doctor. This entity appears to be a humanoid male wearing 15th century Plague Doctor garb, but the clothes are actually part of its biological skin. The threat profile shifts here from physical speed to biological cessation. SCP-049's touch is lethal. It causes immediate termination of all biological functions. It doesn't matter how much willpower Batman has. If skin meets skin, the cellular structure dies instantly. The scientific constraint for Batman is the exposed portion of his face. The standard bat suit leaves the jaw and chin vulnerable. In a fight against Scarecrow, a gas mask fixes this. Against SCP-049, a single graze against that exposed skin means death. Additionally, 049 is obsessed with the pestilence, an undefined concept that doesn't align with modern virology. Batman's empirical detective skills might actually hinder him here as he tries to categorize a disease that doesn't exist in a textbook. Batman's strategy would rely heavily on chemical warfare and isolation. Recognizing the biological threat, he would likely deploy the full hazardous materials protocol integrated into the suit, sealing the jaw, utilizing a rebreather, and covering all exposed skin. He would analyze the lavender-based sedatives 049 uses to calm patients and attempt to synthesize a counter-agent or a weaponized version to incapacitate the doctor. The failure point, however, is psychological. SCP-049 is intelligent, articulate, and polite. He isn't a mindless monster. He's a surgeon. He would likely speak to Batman, analyzing him instantly. 049 seeks to cure the Great Pestilence, and he often identifies this sickness in those who harbor deep trauma or emotional pain. Bruce Wayne is practically made of trauma. If 049 begins to psychoanalyze the death of Bruce's parents, framing his grief as the pestilence that needs curing, he could bait Batman into a moment of hesitation. We rate this as medium difficulty. Batman can physically dominate this fight, provided he treats 049 like a walking biohazard and not a rogue. But the risk is absolute. A single touch bypasses all armor ratings, all training, and all prep time. If Batman allows 049 to close the distance for a diagnosis, the fight ends in a single heartbeat, followed shortly by Batman rising again as a mindless zombie instance, SCP-049-2. Moving from biological hazards to kinetic nightmares, we encounter SCP-096. This entity represses a fundamental shift in the type of threat Batman faces. While 049 is a chess match, 096 is a natural disaster compressed into a humanoid frame. The threat profile here is singular. If you view its face, directly or indirectly, it will kill you. There is no negotiation, no hesitation, and crucially, no stopping it. Once triggered, SCP-096 enters an emotional distress state and begins moving toward the viewer. The terrifying science of this creature lies in its infinite stamina and structural invulnerability. We aren't talking about bulletproof in the way Killer Croc is bulletproof. We are talking about a skeletal structure that has withstood sustained anti-tank weaponry and high-altitude atmospheric drops without a single fracture. The scientific constraint for Batman here is simple physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. But SCP-096 ignores the force limit. No material in the Batcave, not the reinforced composites of the Batmobile, not the Wayne Tech blast doors, and certainly not the Kevlar weave of the Batsuit, can withstand the continuous force exertion of 096 tearing through matter. If Batman locks himself in a bunker, 096 doesn't pick the lock. It swims through the steel and concrete as if they were water. The energy output required to stop 096's forward momentum is theoretically infinite once it has a target. Batman's strategy must be absolute sensory deprivation. He is the world's greatest detective, and his first instinct is to look. That instinct is his death warrant. During the 24-hour prep time, Bruce would deduce that sight is the trigger mechanism. Consequently, he would likely remove his ability to see entirely. We would see him utilizing a modified version of the sonar mapping lenses, or perhaps the echolocation suite from the specialized blind fighting training he underwent with the League of Shadows. By fighting blindly and relying on acoustic imaging, he avoids the trigger. He would attempt to entrap the entity, perhaps using quick hardening foam, without causing it physical pain, which might trigger a rage state regardless of observation. However, the failure point is statistically probable during the preparation phase itself. The Foundation has documented the 4 pixels incident, where a mountain climber triggered 096 by looking at a photo where the creature took up merely 4 pixels of background noise. If Batman during his research views a single frame of surveillance footage where 096's face is reflected in a window or a puddle, the fight is over before he even puts on the cowl. Furthermore, even if he navigates the fight perfectly, physical incapacitation is impossible with standard gear. Batman's martial arts rely on leverage and pain compliance. You cannot apply an armbar to a creature that can rip through a bank vault, and you cannot knock out something that doesn't have a standard brain physiology. We rate this as hard difficulty. Batman cannot defeat SCP-096 in a traditional sense. He can only hope to evade it or lure it into a contaminated cell that he cannot look at. If the trigger is activated, the survival rate drops to absolute 0. Stealth is negated by 096's innate biological tracking, which locates the victim regardless of distance or shielding. This isn't a fight, it's an execution waiting to happen. If SCP-096 is an unstoppable force, SCP-106 is an inescapable rot. Known as the Old Man, this entity appears as an elderly humanoid in advanced stages of decomposition, but scientifically, it is a sentient pocket dimension anchor. The threat profile focuses on 2 terrifying abilities: the production of a corrosive mucus that destabilizes atomic bonds, and the ability to phase through solid matter. Batman's entire tactical doctrine relies on the environment. Against SCP-106, these physical barriers are non-existent. The scientific constraint here is the nullification of physical defense. Batman's armor is designed to disperse kinetic energy and resist thermal damage. It is not designed to stop a substance that dissolves matter at a molecular level. If 106 walks through a wall, the corrosive sludge left behind would eat through the Batsuit's outer weave in seconds, causing severe chemical burns and necrotic tissue damage to Bruce beneath. Furthermore, Batman cannot grapple to safety. 106 can simply walk up the wall after him or emerge from the ceiling he is hanging from. The high ground does not exist when your opponent treats solid matter like a liquid. Batman's strategy would have to pivot from physical containment to environmental manipulation. Foundation files indicate that SCP-106 has a specific aversion to sudden, high-intensity light and complex lead-lined containment patterns. Bruce would likely rig the battlefield, perhaps the Batcave or an abandoned warehouse, with industrial-grade UV floodlights and strobe arrays capable of outputting lumens similar to a flashbang, but sustained. He would attempt to herd this entity using light as a barrier, effectively creating a cage of photons. We might also see him utilizing liquid nitrogen or cryo pellets, attempting to slow the entity's metabolic processes, assuming thermodynamics still applies to its physiology. The failure point, however, is the pocket dimension capture method. SCP-106 prefers to disable its prey by dragging them into a pocket reality, a dimension where time, space, and biology obey 106's will. If Batman is grabbed, or if he steps into a puddle of corrosion that acts as a portal, he is transported to this trench warfare nightmare. In that dimension, gadgets don't work, physics don't apply. Deducing a pattern is impossible because the environment shifts according to the entity's sadistic whims. Batman's legendary willpower would be his only asset, but willpower doesn't stop your body from being biologically reconfigured by a reality-bending sadist. We rate this as hard difficulty. Conventional containment fails because you cannot lock up a ghost that eats locks. Batman must rely entirely on exploiting the light sensitivity, making this a trap-based encounter rather than a fight. If he misses his window to herd the entity into a specialized containment unit, or if the power grid to his floodlights is cut, the Dark Knight simply vanishes into the floor, becoming another missing person file in the GCPD archives. This is a scenario where the detective becomes the mystery. Finally, we arrive at the apex predator of the Foundation, SCP-682. If the previous entries were difficult, this one is a mathematical impossibility. 682 is a large reptile of indeterminate origin, but describing it as a big lizard is like calling a hurricane a breeze. The threat profile here is reactive evolution. Batman has fought adaptive enemies like Doomsday or Clayface before, but 682 operates on a different tier of reality. It has survived nuclear detonation, reality erasure, and the laws of physics being rewritten to delete it. This exceeds anything in Gotham's rogues gallery. The scientific constraint is a massive energy deficit. The caloric and thermal energy required to destroy 682's biomass completely is simply higher than anything Batman can output with his handheld or vehicular weaponry. Physical trauma is counterproductive. If Batman hits it with the Batmobile, 682 doesn't just heal, it grows armor plating specifically designed to shatter the car on the next impact. The creature violates the law of conservation of mass, regenerating matter from nothing, which breaks every predictive model Batman could run in the Batcomputer. Batman's strategy would likely involve borrowing from his enemies. Recognizing that kinetic force is useless, he would turn to extreme environmental shifts. We would see him utilizing a weaponized version of Mr. Freeze's cryotechnology to halt the creature's cellular activity, attempting to freeze it down to absolute zero. He might also employ high-frequency sonic disruptors to destabilize its molecular cohesion, alternatively aiming to incapacitate the reptile's nervous system rather than its body. He would treat this like a containment breach of a god-tier biological weapon. But here is the failure point. 682 adapts faster than Batman can invent. In Foundation logs, when subjected to extreme acid, 682 didn't just survive, it evolved to produce the acid itself. If Batman freezes it, 682's biology will likely shift to become exothermic, generating intense heat that melts the ice and boils Batman alive in his suit. If he uses sonic attacks, it develops sound-dampening flesh. The 24-hour prep time is actually a detriment here because it gives Batman false hope that a logical solution exists. We rate this as impossible. There is no win condition. You cannot outthink a creature that evolves to counter your thoughts. This is a biological puzzle the Foundation has failed to solve for decades with infinite resources. Bruce Wayne isn't solving it in a night. Batman clears the intelligent or strictly biological threats like the Plague Doctor and the Sculpture, albeit with high difficulty and zero margin for error. However, he hits a hard wall against cosmic anomalies like the Shy Guy or the Hard-to-Destroy Reptile. Science and deduction are powerful tools for solving puzzles, but they fail against forces of nature that actively rewrite the laws of physics. Batman represents the peak of human potential, but the SCP Foundation is a catalog of things that eat potential for lunch. But maybe we're wrong. Could the Hellbat suit make a difference against the Lizard? Comment below which SCP you think Batman could actually beat if he had a full year of prep time. And don't forget to subscribe to Nerd Science for more breakdown analyses.